everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Eric Sturm. I'm the principal of the International Academy of Macomb, if you don't know me. And I'm very privileged to be here tonight because we're going to talk tonight about the IB Diploma program. And that's the bread and butter of our school. It's what we started the school with back in 2008. It's the first program, the first IB program we were authorized with. And just a little bit about the Diploma program. It's a two-year program for grades 11 and 12. And for those of you that don't know, a little bit of history, it started in 1968, really as a program for students who came from international backgrounds, students who perhaps were going to school in foreign countries but wanted to get a high school diploma that would help them gain entry to universities around the world. And it still has that currency today. So that if you're an IB Diploma graduate from our school, for any IB school, it's possible that you go to universities anywhere in the world. And we do have a number of students that choose to go to universities elsewhere, not so many as in other places. But it's the same diploma one would receive if one were an IB student in London or in Mumbai or in Beijing. And so it's really interesting for that purpose. And that's really the other piece about the IB Diploma. You know, with the exams that the students take at the end of the two-year program when they're seniors, and you're going to hear Ms. Meyer talk about that in a second. Those exams are the same exams that are taken by students around the world. So when our students are being prepared by our teachers, and you're going to hear from our subject experts tonight, and being prepared for those series of exams that occur in the month of May, that's happening all around the world in IB schools everywhere. And so really for that reason, the IB Diploma I think is very interesting. A few other things about it in case you don't know. You know, the IB Diploma program is really characterized by this series of assessments, internal and external assessments. And you're going to hear about both of those terms tonight. Internal assessments are the assessments that our teachers deliver within the 2 years of the program. So in each subject, you will hear the teachers talk about the internal assessments that they are providing students, and they are using the IB criteria to mark those assessments. So these are established criteria that are given by the IB and used worldwide. And our teachers are marking those assessments according to those criteria. One of the interesting processes with those criteria is that they are moderated. That is, when a teacher marks those assessments, that they have to actually provide a sample of those assessments to Ms. Meyer, our IB coordinator, and then she in turn delivers those to the assessment center of the IB in Cardiff, Wales, in the UK. And then there is another level of examiner that will check to see that our teachers are marking those assessments accurately. And actually we're moderated on our own assessments. So that means that sometimes the IB will tell us you're being too harsh. Sometimes you're being too easy. And so there's a system of moderation that goes on that I think is really fascinating. And that's with the internal assessments. The external assessments are the ones that the IB provides at the end of the 2 years, that series of exams, and some other things you're going to hear about tonight, like the extended essay, the 4,000-word research essay that is really a fabulous opportunity for students to gain skills, research skills, and to do something at a college level that I think is really very meaningful. So internal and external assessments. Then you're going to hear about some other things that I think run through the IB Diploma. One of these is this spirit of inquiry. That is that in each of the subjects, whether it's English, whether it's theater, whether it's physics, there is within the assessment structure this opportunity for students to engage as inquirers in that particular field. So that at this point in their career, the student is really becoming the biologist, becoming the English critic, becoming the economist, and really engaging in questions that they have developed themselves. So you're going to hear that theme as you hear each subject expert talk about their particular subject. Well, all of this is so that you can help your sons and daughters make informed choices about the subjects that they will choose for the IB diploma. Because there is this moment in time where we want students to be strategic, to go with their strong suit, so to speak, so that they do the best possible job that they can within this program. And this is really the, if you had to say, you know, we don't have sports at the IM, we don't have, you know, necessarily cheerleaders and things like that. This is our really the most, I think if you ask students and ask teachers, what we get behind is this IB diploma and all of its component parts. And that's what our school is founded on. It's part of our core, and so that's what you're going to hear about tonight in a lot of detail. So at the end of the evening, what we're going to do is line up and kind of answer your questions. We'll have each teacher stay up here, so we're not going to take general questions, but we're going to allow you, if you have a particular question for math, you can see Mr. Hasulis. If you have a particular question for English, you can see Ms. DeMay. And each teacher will introduce themselves as they come up here now. So hopefully, you know, you will have an opportunity to ask any question that you so desire. We've also been talking about all these questions in school as well, but we'd like parents to hear the same message. With that, I think I will introduce Ms. Meyer, our IB coordinator.
Thank you, Mr. Stern. And do we have the Good evening, everyone. Welcome. This kind of, you could talk about those IB exams as our Olympics, right? Given the climate, it's kind of like our culminating experience. Since you are sophomore parents and students, you're very familiar with the MYP and what IB asks you to do as a student for at the end of the 10th grade. Likewise, they have similar requirements for the students at the end of the 12th grade. So when we look at the classes that the students have to take, there are 6 groups. IB calls them groups. The first group is their first language. Ours is English. So that's called English A. So all the students have to take an exam in their native language. They can decide whether they want to take that at a higher level or a standard level. And IB requires that the students have 3 higher levels and 3 standard levels. I see some of you taking notes. Don't worry about that. We are going to post this PowerPoint on our website, so that will be, you know, you can look at that at your leisure as far as all of the information, because we're going to be giving you a lot of details tonight. So first group is the English A for us. Second group is the language B, which we have German, Spanish, and French. So the students can choose whether they're going to take the exam in German, Spanish, or French. Of course, you know they've already taken it since they're a 9th grader. So when they're a 12th grader, they would have already had the language for 4 years, and they should be fluent in that language and expected to do very well in that exam. Third group is individuals and societies. It is a history. Our students all take history. Economics is also in that group, and our students can take that as a 6th group, which as a 6th class, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Fourth group is sciences, experimental sciences. As you know, your child took a biology class in the freshman year, and in the sophomore year right now, he or she has both chemistry and physics. So when they become a junior, they now decide which one do they want to concentrate in, one of those 3. When they take their exam, however, in the senior year, they not only are taking that exam in that science in group 4, they could also choose another science for group 6. 5th group is mathematics. So our students are offered mathematics HL, mathematics SL, or mathematics math studies SL. So they have to choose one of those 3. Then we come to group 6. And group 6, there are a lot of opportunities for group 6. It can be in the arts. So we have visual arts, music, drama, theater, we have that. They could take it in econ, they could take another language, or they could take another science. So that would be their exam in group 6. Okay, so they are taking 6 exams. We offer them at the ISD. There are certain requirements, just as if your student were taking an AP. There are specific requirements as to how those are administered. Same thing with these exams. And we don't have room in this facility because we share the building. So the ISD is a wonderful environment in which your students can take those exams. So we have all of those classes or exams in May of the senior year. Okay? We also then have 3 requirements. In order to get that IB diploma, students must complete their extended essay. We're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. They have to complete the TOK essay, Theory of Knowledge, and also the CAS activities. Right. The students take those exams that as we talked about in May. They're spread out over 3 weeks, and that schedule is completely determined by IB. Every year it changes a little bit as to which exams are offered on which days. But they're all spread out over 3 weeks, and our staff does an incredible job offering study sessions for the students during that whole month of May. So for instance, if the student takes an English, maybe an English HL and SL class are offered within the first week. The teachers, once the students are finished with school, seniors, which is towards the end of April, they now have scheduled study sessions where the students come into the IAM and work with the teacher, reviewing the information in that class. So, and our staff has a wonderful schedule worked out. It's really incredible, and the students do come in and study in that particular class right before they're taking their exam. So that happens in May. There is a cost associated with taking these exams, and it is quite hefty, but you can recoup that cost. The IB sets that cost, and right now, this year, the seniors paid $119 per each of the 6 classes, plus a $176 registration fee. So they are into it for $886. Every year, IB raises the price of that exam by $3 usually, and the registration fee by about $4. So next year, seniors will have to pay about $908. So you can maybe add $22 to that for when your students are going to be seniors. Okay, so that's what it costs to take those exams. We ask for that money in October of the senior year. However, as your students take those exams and they are getting great scores on those exams, the IB exams are rated on a scale of 1 to 7. So if they're getting 5s, 6s, 7s, sometimes 4, the colleges will give them credit for that. So they can recoup a lot more than that $900 by doing very well on their exams. So yes, it is a big hit at that point, but the students will do well and recoup that price. Okay, this is called the wheel, so to speak. It's a schematic of the diploma program. It has different components to it. On the outside concentric circle, you see that is international mindedness. The IB is all about international mindedness, learning respect and understanding for other cultures. As we go into the wheel, the next circle is our list of 6 classes that we talked about. There are the 6 groups. Okay, as we come in, we're talking about those other 3 required areas in order to get the IB diploma: the theory of knowledge, the CAS, and the extended essay. Then as we get further in, it's all about approaches to teaching and approaches to learning, the ways in which our faculty teaches the students, so that they talk about habits of mind and ways in which the students are learning and the way our faculty is teaching the areas. And then right in the center, which I consider to be the crux of this, it is all about the IB learner profile. It is essentially character education. It is exactly the type of characteristics you would want to instill in your child. And that's at the center of all of the IB programs. So that's the wheel, that's the schematic which describes the diploma program. Okay, the creativity, action, and service, that was one of the 3 which is required. The students are expected to satisfy 150 hours, and that might seem like a lot, but it's not. They start at the beginning of the junior year, and they can accrue those hours for the next 2 years. So by the end of that senior year, they have to have put in 150 hours of community of the 3 areas: community service, action, activity, okay, and service. So they do various projects, and it's a reflective thinking. They have to do reflections and submit those in order to get the credit.
Just want to go back to the schematic for one more minute here so everybody understands. You know, the IB diploma is distinct from the diploma that students receive at the International Academy of Macomb. It's a high school diploma. The IB diploma is the international diploma that's issued by the IB organization, and it's something we're really proud of our students receiving. In fact, I can say that we have one of the highest diploma acquisition rates in the state, if not the highest. Most of our students get that full diploma. And the way that they do that is by achieving all of these different elements. It's not possible to pick and choose things, so to speak. You can't say, I don't want to do math this year, or I don't feel like doing foreign language, or I don't want to do that extended essay. To get the IB diploma, one must kind of do all of the requirements that are required within the program itself, including the subject requirements and the core components. The first of those core components that Ms. Meyer talked about was creativity, activity, and service. So that piece is part of the requirement for doing the IB diploma. Similarly, the next core component, IB theory of knowledge, which Mr. Jones is going to talk about, is the second of the core components, and an element that all of our students do.
So the Theory of Knowledge course is a course that's kind of special in that it's interdisciplinary. It's something that goes across the disciplines here. We have a number of teachers actually involved in teaching it. Mr. Pete and myself actually just got back from training last week for Theory of Knowledge. I taught it a couple of years ago. Oh, there we go.
You're on film.
Didn't realize that. We also have Mr. Cozy teaches some theory of knowledge, and even Mr. Sturm and Dr. Strong as well now, I believe, right? So this course is kind of about knowledge in general, and its acquisition and its application, and the different ways that we acquire our knowledge. And so this is I think I've got another slide for it here. This is a 2-semester course, but it's split up over junior and senior year. So as juniors, the students will be taking the second semester. This is required of all juniors. And then in junior year, we're focused really on this internal assessment portion of it, which is a presentation that the students will be giving. And we also focus on these different ways of knowing. First semester of senior year, the students will be working towards writing their theory of knowledge essay, and they focus more on kind of the applications, how these ways of knowing are used in these different areas of knowing, they call, which are split up between the different sciences and history and arts and that sort of thing. And so the presentation that they do as juniors is scored internally. That's an internal assessment, and then the essay is actually an external assessment that is sent to examiners. I believe that's it for me. Mr. May will be coming up next.
Hello, I'm going to talk to you a bit about the extended essay and the English courses. I walk so much. The extended essay is part of the IB diploma. It's a separate course that will appear on your child's transcript. It's not necessarily a course they attend, but it's on their schedule. You'll see my name on that. I'm not the teacher, I'm just the coordinator, and so I go in and help the students. It is a 4,000-word research paper that we start in junior year, and about January of the junior year, we might push it back to December next year. And it's a research paper about a topic of their own choosing. Some students do English, some do history, some do econ, some do science, and it really gives them an opportunity to be researchers, and that's what the IB is looking for. I know several of my students have used their extended essay in college presentations or when they're interviewing for scholarships as a tangible artifact of what they've learned and how they've done this independently. Every student is assigned a supervisor based on the subject of his or her essay. And so that supervisor guides the student, but it is the student's own work, and most of it is done outside of school. So it really gives them a chance to work independently and show what they've learned. And also I'll talk about English, because I'm an English teacher. Sorry. Most students, we strongly encourage that all students take English HL. And the reason for that is, unlike math and some sciences, every single student has it's the same class. We don't divide the students into HL and SL. But more importantly, there's very, very, very little difference between HL English and SL English. So this year, every single student is taking HL English. What is interesting about the IB, as opposed to some other methods of study, I guess, is that besides testing writing, they also test spoken word and how well your student can communicate. Every single semester at our school has an IB assessment tied to it. And so the IB says you can teach these 4 sections of English in any order you want, but you have to cover them. We've chosen the most logical based on their assessments and what we have found works. Their junior year, they will do a works in translation, which they will read literature, obviously, that was originally written in a different language, and study the cultural context of that. From that semester comes their written assignment, which is the IB's way of assessing how well your students can write in a polished manner. How can they edit and draft and write. Then they will also take options of school choice, where we have some fluidity in what we teach. The IB assessment there is a formal presentation where they get to plan a presentation and present it to their classmates. Then going into senior year, okay, so going into senior year, we study, it's called a genre study, and we study three different types of literature. From that is the individual oral commentary. And this is an under pressure, spoken discussion of literature. Every single student presents to me or Mrs. Amthor for 20 minutes. And it's not rehearsed. They get 20 minutes of prep time and they come in and give a presentation. And finally, second semester of their senior year is a genre study, and we pick drama because there's a lot of reasons, but it seems most accessible. And at the end of that is their IB papers, their formal, what they go to the ISD for. Basically, the content, right now, all of you are in 10th grade, and we're reading. At the IB level, they're expected to read between 30 and 50 pages per night, but that's with the block schedule. But more importantly, they're expected to understand and annotate, and that's what we've been practicing in 9th and 10th grade. And I think that's all. I'm also going to do foreign language, apparently. Basically, the foreign language here, students decide if they want to be, SL or HL, but they don't decide that until their senior year. As with English, English is decided in their junior year, right around October, November, before their first assessment. However, language B, you do have the option of SL or HL, and their assessments are somewhat similar to English. There's a written paper 1, a written paper 2, and then a spoken commentary, just like in English, but obviously in the target language. And there's an internal assessment, which I think is a writing piece. Okay? All right.
Just want to mention a couple things about the language program in the IB. You know, one of the original focuses of the IB diploma was on speaking a foreign language fluently and learning to communicate in a foreign language. And it still carries that point today. It's a very important point. There's a lot of parallels between language A and language B. Language A being the native language and language B being the foreign language. If you're in an IB school, let's say in Italy, language A is going to be Italian for you. Language B might be English. Similarly, if you're at an IB school in China, Mandarin is probably going to be your language A, English is going to be your language B. For us, it's different. We offer English as our language A, and then French, German, or Spanish is our language B. Another point I want to kind of mention to you is that you're hearing a lot of discussion of HL versus SL, higher level versus standard level. Students have to test in 3 subjects that they choose at higher level and 3 that they choose at standard level. The IB recommends 3 and 3. What does that mean? Higher level really is about the number of hours required for that particular course of study, and that's 240 hours. Here at the IAM, we are in excess of that in almost every single course. Almost all of our courses have enough hours to teach all of the topics required at a higher level. But students are choosing, when they get to those exams in the month of May of their senior year, which 3 are their strongest and which 3 are the ones that maybe they're not so strong in. Or in certain cases, they may be strong in all 6, but they still have to choose 3 and 3. In very rare cases, we have students choose 4 HLs and 2 SLs to test. But in reality, they have the requisite number of hours for all of those particular courses. It's just a matter of that choice. There are a couple courses that you'll hear are only taught at the standard level. And that's for all IB schools all around the world. Okay? I think with that, we're back to Mr. Jones to talk about IB history, individuals and societies.
All right, so IB history is a required course for all of our IB diploma students. And as Dr. Sturm just mentioned, there is an HL and an SL component to this. Our courses in IB history are all taught combined. So all students will essentially be learning all of the content. In history, this is we kind of figure the way we've chosen the topics, it doesn't hurt the SL students to have that additional content. It helps in the historical context and everything when they're working on it. But if we look at the key difference between SL and HL in terms of the assessment is in the HL level, there is an additional paper, and what that paper consists of is 3 additional essays. In SL history, you'll be taking a paper 1, which is a document-based question. It's a number of short answer questions, and then there's an essay at the end of it. Then there's also paper 2, which has 2 kind of more fully developed essays in it. And then paper 3 has an additional 3 essays to that as well. So in terms of the difference between SL and HL in history, content-wise, we teach everybody everything. Like I said, it doesn't hurt the SL kids to have that extra content in there. But assessment-wise, it is, it is a big additional component to write those 3 extra essays at the end. And they're pretty focused, and you really got to know your material pretty well for those. The content that we go through, we've kind of curated in a way to make it easy to, I guess, overlap, so we're not really pulling from a lot of different places. The IB history program focuses a lot more on depth than breadth of coverage here, and we kind of reflect that in our choices. We focus primarily on 20th century history with a focus on 20th century European history. And so you can see the breakdown here on the slide. I've already mentioned the 3 different types of assessments, but we also have this internal assessment as each subject does. This is the form of basically a 2,200 word research paper. There's some reflection and some source analysis involved with it as well. And that's something that students will do actually in the beginning of their junior year, because I don't believe they started it yet in 10th grade, but they will be coming up pretty soon. They'll be doing a practice version of that. So they'll be entering 11th grade history already being familiar with the internal assessment, and then a good portion of that first quarter of junior year, we actually kind of turn them loose again on the internal assessment with we give them lots of time in class to work on it, but the idea is that they've already kind of got an understanding of what they need to do because we focus so much on it at the end of 10th grade. So that's history. The other individuals in societies class we offer here is an elective course, and that would be economics. Our economics course is also offered SL or HL. I would say almost all of our students end up taking economics as HL. Whether you're SL or HL, we still are going to cover the same material here. We have micro, macro, international, and developmental economics. Most of the first year is spent on microeconomics. There's also kind of this foundational unit that we start the course with, but it's primarily focused on microeconomics, and then macro, international, and developmental we all do in the second year. We also have an internal assessment component in economics. It's a little less intense, I guess I could say, than the history one because it's actually split up over the course of 2 years. So the internal assessment here, we actually have to submit just 3 commentaries. So the students will identify an article that they're interested in that has something to do with the topic that we're studying, and then they will use the economic theory that we've learned in class and apply it to that event or that article or those policies that they've chosen. So they actually will be writing 5 of them. We have a practice one, and then we have one for each unit, but of those 5 they choose 3 that they'll ultimately be submitting for their internal assessment. The external assessment, they have paper 1, which is essay based. They'll have a couple of questions, one from micro and one from macro, that they'll answer in the form of an essay. They're actually 2-part essays that they have to write for each of those. Paper 2, they have some shorter answer questions based on an article that's given to them. So again, they're applying the theory to some sort of data or information that they've been given. And then paper 3 is primarily really short answer, mathematics-based questions or short definitions or explanations in there. Now, so unlike history, you're not required to take economics. So this is kind of something that some students choose. And I guess it's kind of my opportunity to sell it a little bit because I really like the course and I'd like you guys to consider it. But we have basically in economics, we have another situation where if you're looking for an HL, you're not sure what to take, you're in the HL class whether you're taking SL or HL. Unlike history where you have this, pretty serious component of that paper 3, I would argue that the paper 3, which is HL only for economics, is probably the easiest of the 3 papers up here to do. So, I mean, there are pieces of the curriculum that you don't really need to know for your SL exam, but again, like history, we're teaching it anyway. It certainly doesn't hurt your understanding. So as long as you're comfortable with that material, the 3rd paper here is not a tremendous burden for that. In addition, if you do well in economics, again, this depends on the school, but a lot of schools are offering 8 credits worth of economics credit, both for micro and macro. And so that's certainly something that I would keep in mind.
I have to give one more plug before Mr. Lamlin comes up to talk about science. Mr. Jones talks about the teachers curating the subject kind of choices within each area. I want to mention that with the IB in general, there's a lot of choice. There's choice for students, there's some choice for teachers, and really it's about making decisions about what is going to be kind of most interesting and thought-provoking and really effective. And for our teachers, I want to say that, and they're not going to probably say this, that we have a number of teachers who are examiners. And that means that they are examining papers from around the world from students in different schools and applying the rubrics from the IB to do that examining. Mr. Jones is one of those examiners in history and extended essay. Ms. DeMay is an examiner in English. And actually we have another teacher, Ms. Amthor, who is actually writing the curriculum for IB theater, and she's traveling to The Hague to do that. She just got back as of last week, I believe, or so. And so that is something we're very proud of. And our teachers are really, when you talk about curating, they're making strategic decisions in order to kind of facilitate student learning in the most effective way. And I think that's really important to note. With that, we'll take Mr. Lambden to talk about the sciences.
Good evening. So the sciences, this is where you really get a little bit of choice here. So up until this point, you have to take your English, you have to take your history. You get to choose your science. And at this point, your students have taken 3 years of science. So they've taken bio as a freshman, and they're currently taking that chem and physics. And so they have some background about what choices to make here. All of those, bio, chem, and physics, are taught at both SL and HL level. And your student can choose which one that they like and feel that they can be the most successful in. We are constantly providing feedback, and if students have questions about it, we are very forthright about what we feel they'll be most successful in. The fourth choice up there, Environmental Systems and Societies, is an environmental science class. And as with all of them, they're incredibly hands-on. This one is kind of the integration of science and history. It's a social science, and so in that class they will learn about the current environmental issues and what we're currently doing about them. All of these are incredibly hands-on. They are inquiry-based classes where we do a lot of experimentation. The requirement for them is that we have 1 assessed investigation. I know for my juniors in bio we have 4 practices throughout the course of junior year. And so their assessment or their lab report is essentially a 12-page document, or up to 12 pages, that is walking them through the whole experimental process. We also have the requirement of a Group 4 project, in which we try to take students who are interested in biochem, physics, and environmental systems and societies, and we pair them up, and they all do 1 collaborative experiment together, and that takes place in the beginning of senior year. I think that's it. We're good?
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Nasuas.
So mathematics is unique in that it's the one subject area where the classes are actually divided into 3 separate classes. Whereas in, say, history, IB history, there's SL and HL students in the same class. Math is done a little differently. This graphic up here kind of shows you there's the 3 classes and what they're kind of comparable to. IB Math Studies is comparable to like a pre-calc class. Math SL is like a Calculus 1 class, maybe like a AP Calculus AB, and then IB Math HL would be kind of like a Calc 1 and 2, AP Calculus BC course. They're not those. They are, I say, comparable. You'll see IB Math is integrated. There's many different topics within the course, but that's kind of just an idea of kind of what it's comparable to in I guess, the United States math courses. This graphic up here kind of shows you the pace year by year. I'll speak with this. There's a small group of your students that are currently in Algebra 2 as they are, they took Algebra 2 as 9th graders. They're currently in IB Math SL. Their option essentially is limited to, they have to go to IB Math HL, which is the path that they chose at the beginning before 9th grade year. Most of your students took Honors Geometry in 9th grade. They are currently in Algebra 2. And now is, yesterday and today, they've been given a course recommendation. We essentially have we use 3 criteria to recommend a course for the students. They are a combination of standardized test scoring, Algebra 2 grade, and a non-calculator placement test that we gave them last week. The reason we do that is because it's really critical that we recommend a course that has the right amount of rigor for each student. The courses, the highest level course, IB Math HL, is essentially, I think, I say worldwide, I think 20% of IB students take that course. All right. I would not recommend that course for anyone that doesn't have a solid A in Algebra 2. That course is for students that love math like I do. It's something that, the one thing that I have had some students, and this might come up, we make sure to tell students if they have any questions about their placement, come talk to us. But one of the things that's really difficult when they're choosing the course is they don't necessarily realize what it's like to be a diploma candidate student. They're coming out of the middle years program and listening to Ms. DeMay talking about the internal overall commentary and the extended essay, their CAS project. There's a lot of things that are added on to the junior year that they have no idea about right now. And so it's really critical to make sure that they take our recommendations seriously. And then the next level course is the math standard level. I think probably about, of the rest, I think they kind of split up. About 50% of students take that, and then 50% of the students take math studies. I think the biggest thing to consider too, one, what are you going into in like college? What do you see yourself going into? If you see a lot of math in your future, obviously standard level or higher level. If you don't see a lot of math in your future, math studies or math SL will suffice. The other important thing to consider is whatever course you choose, they're in it for a full year. And so sometimes if they choose something that's maybe a little bit more challenging than maybe Algebra 2 was for them, it could be a rough year for them. And so it's really important that they choose the right course for them. And all four of us here are here to answer whatever questions they have. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact your student's math teacher, and I'm confident that we'll get the right course. The math studies, it's integrated in that there's lots of different numbers and algebra, stats, probability. It's really heavy into stats and probability. That's, I think, the biggest difference between math studies and the other two math courses. There's both, and they do get into calculus. There is an introduction to what calculus is, and so they'll have an idea of how to use calculus, and maybe they choose to take a business calculus class in college or something like that. It gives them a baseline. There's an internal assessment, which is a math project that they're choosing. The internal assessments we really like because as math teachers, we get the question all the time, when are we ever going to use this? The math projects, the internal assessments are all designed to take the math outside the classroom, maybe to explain something that they've observed in real life, or maybe to explore something. I saw a paper on a student was trying to find out if there's a correlation between the amount of sleep that someone gets and GPA. I don't know, maybe the more sleep they get, the higher the GPA, or the less sleep they get, the higher the GPA, because they're studying all the time. Or is there a best amount of sleep to get a night? But they use math to do that, and for us, it's really neat to see because they're doing something that kind of we showed them in class, and they're kind of using it to kind of do something that's interesting, interested to them. So that's the internal assessment. There are two external assessments. Both of them are 90 minutes long, and in this class, they get a calculator for both of them. The middle level class, mathematics standard level, obviously the biggest part of this class I think was stats and prob and calculus, but a lot of the same topics, they also include vectors. The internal assessment is very similar to the internal assessment in math studies. I think I have one right last year that was trying to use calculus, integral calculus, to explain the distribution of wealth in several different countries using something that they learned in Mr. Jones' econ class. So there's a lot of opportunities for them to do that in the internal assessment. The external assessments are two 90-minute papers. One they get a calculator for, one they do not. And so this is a course where they don't always get a calculator. And then finally, mathematics HL. The biggest difference here between HL and SL is the amount of material, the depth of coverage, and they get into series and differential equations. The reason we split the courses up is if we were to teach Math SL and Math HL in the same class to all the students, the pace that we would have to go at would be much faster than a lot of the students in the class can handle. Because there is a lot more, I think there's an extra 50 hours of material in Math HL compared to Math SL. So internal assessment is the same as the Math Excel internal assessment. The biggest difference is the degree to which it's assessed. It's assessed much stricter than the SL exploration is. And then the other difference is with the external assessment, there are 3 papers for math higher level compared to the 2 for standard level and studies. But again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact any one of us, and I'm sure we'll get the right course for your students. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Zulis. Okay, well, the 6th subject option is the IB elective, and so there's various options here. You're going to hear, this is where the greatest degree of choice really lies. So students can do an extra language. You'll hear about that. So if they're taking, let's say, Spanish as their main language in Group 2, they could do beginning French in this Group 6 option, or beginning German. An additional science, here's where, as Ms. Meyer mentioned, students can choose another science if they're really into science. They can also choose economics, as Mr. Jones mentioned. You're going to hear about IB music, visual arts, and theater. These are the arts components. And originally, in the configuration of that wheel that Ms. Meyer showed, those arts components were meant to be kind of the point of this Group 6 option. But now it's become the elective for all. So you're going to hear about all of these. This is where the most choice occurs for students. And to start out, Ms. Anthor with IB theater.
This is a very exciting time at the IAM to be part of the theater program. We have been selected as one of 35 schools internationally to pilot the new course curriculum for the theater course. And your students, or you, if you're a student, will be the first pilot cohort internationally. What's exciting about that is your students' work will be part of the resources that are shared internationally with teachers when the course goes live in 2 years. The curriculum manager, hopefully, will come to our school and interview the students and get their feedback about the course for when we go into the final stages of the final draft. For some schools, this is a very scary process because it's new and there's nothing to go off of. But for our school, it's exciting because, as Dr. Sturm said, I helped write the course, so I know exactly what we want. And I will make sure that your students are on the track for success. I'm very confident in this course. The course writing process is a process, and there's a meeting, you go, you meet, they invite you back, maybe. Some people disappeared, we never saw them again. I'm not sure where they went. And I kept getting invited back, and I'm like, I don't know why I'm getting invited back. I've only been here for 4 years as an IB teacher. And then I realized I'm called back because I teach at a public school. And American public schools are the fastest growing demographic in the IB, but we are the demographic that is the most marginalized in the IB because most of IB schools internationally are private schools, and they have different resources than we have. So my voice became very significant in that conversation about how do we make this curriculum accessible for all students, regardless of how much money basically their school has. And I'm very outspoken, as my colleagues and leaders know. And I advocated for schools like ours and for our school and for our students so that our kids could be successful in this program, regardless of the resources. And so I'm very confident in the course. I also think it's important to mention that most of the students who take IB theater do not go on to major in theater in college. We are not an arts school. We are not a performing arts school. And the course isn't designed to be for actors or directors. It's a survey course for the appreciation of theater. All of the assessments are production or performance-based, so the students are creating something, but they aren't always acting in that creation. There are opportunities for them to be writers of scripts and technical directors, scenic directors, sound directors, lighting directors. costume directors. They obviously do perform, they study theater, they study other cultures and the traditions of other cultures and their theater practices, and then they report out on what they learned and how it made them a better practitioner of theater and a better person in general. Many of our graduates report that it has helped them in interpersonal communication, obviously being more confident, speaking in front of groups, working on a team, creating and devising in their own fields, which is essential for the young people of this or for the people in this generation. So if your child leans towards a creative spirit, this is definitely a course for them, even if you or they do not want them to pursue a future in theater. Although there are very well-paying jobs in the industry, maybe not as actors, but as directors and designers. There are 4 assessments: the solo theater piece, which focuses on theory, the director's notebook, where the students get to be the director and plot out a moment of theater that they would direct, the research presentation, which is the assessment that's rooted in other cultures' tradition, and then finally the collaborative project, where they collaborate and devise an original piece of theater. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. It's also, I think, important to note that students who earn high marks in IB theater earn up to 8 credits at their universities. I think some people disregard arts courses, that, oh, this won't apply, my child isn't going to get anything out of this in terms of college credit, but students get liberal arts credits as well as communications credits. And to talk about another fabulous Group 6 option is Mr. Cozy, our orchestra director. Choir.
Right, we don't have an orchestra, but we do have band and choir. IB Music is a terrific course. IB Music is a terrific course for arts and music enrichment for 11th and 12th grade students. It is recommended that students be involved in their ensembles during their 11th and 12th grade year. So students who have taken band and choir throughout middle school and high school, they will continue to take band and choir as 11th graders and 12th graders to help develop and make our program stronger and stronger. While they're taking those courses, so while they're in symphonic band or while they're in vocal music, they would take an additional course which is called IB Music. The SL and the HL courses are taught at the same time in the same classroom. And at the end of their junior year, usually somewhere around there, they are deciding whether they are going to go SL or HL. My recommendation is it's a great SL course for any student that's in an ensemble. They can take one of the 3 options, which is group performance. So for group performance, you've heard a lot about internal assessments this evening. The internal assessment for IB Music group performance simply is I take the recordings from our festivals and concerts, their 11th and 12th grade year. I compile them, send them into IB, and that's their entire internal assessment. That doesn't make the course, it makes the course very manageable. But the external assessment requires quite a bit of study, and they're expected to learn about world music, all of music history, including pop, rock, and jazz music. So it's not just classical based. If a student were to be in a rock band that met consistently throughout their 11th and 12th grade years, they could even submit those recordings as their group performance. So it's very open because of all the different possibilities throughout the world that music courses that are offered in different schools. Along with that group performance, they can also take SLS or SLC. The SLS would mean they wouldn't send in group recordings, they would send in solo performance recordings. So if your child takes private lessons, if they go to solo ensemble, if they're in American Guild of Music, they do different solo performances, they would submit 15 to 20 minutes of solo performances taking place during their 11th and 12th grade years, and that would be their internal assessment. There's another component where they could go, another option rather, where they could go SL creation. Creation can be anything from composing in a classical style and submitting scores and recordings, to electronic music. And that's not something that's taught in the course necessarily, but something that your child may have an interest in and a very good option. We have a senior right now that is compiling, I don't know, he has more compositions than I can remember, but he only has to end up sending 3 into IB, and he has to write a reflection and talk about why he made the choices that he did in his compositions. They're really pretty remarkable. The external assessment is taking all that knowledge of history and world music and jazz music and all that stuff. You're taking all that knowledge and analytical skills that you learn. So you look at music scores and say, why did the composers make choices here? So you're deconstructing what a composer has created. And there are 2 pieces that are prescribed by IB that they study. We study together. And then they'll get an additional 2 questions on the listening paper where they have to listen to a world piece of music, listen to a classical piece of music, and or listen to a jazz pop piece of music, and then they have to analyze what they hear in a 1-minute and 30-second clip. So they have to write down, this is the type of instrument I heard here, this is the type of chords, and so on and so forth. The other component of the external assessment, which is 20% of the overall grade, is the musical links investigation, and it's more analysis. So they take music from 2 different cultures, so it could be an Irish jig and Beethoven's Fifth, and they're going to try to link those together through texture, form, harmony, melody, different musical components. So it's really pretty interesting. I'm also sometimes an expert in visual arts. Well, mainly just this slide. We also offer IB Art. It's a 2-year course. It takes place junior and senior year. It is taught in the same class setting. And basically, as you can see here, the biggest difference is the number of pieces that they would be submitting to IB. So HL is required 18 pieces. And SL is required to send in 12 pieces. They also have to show the relationship between the research that they've done through art history and studying various forms of art and their own artistic production. So they have to reflect on what they've done and where they've drawn their ideas from. The 40% of the grade is an investigation workbook, which they keep during their entire 2-year span of the course. So that's another great option in Group 6. You can check out the virtual gallery at ibo.org/gallery.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cozy. And the last option, and I'm just going to mention this, remember, so the foreign language option in Group 2, where students are choosing a mainline language, but they can also choose in this Group 6 option another language. I just want to mention, it's amazing to hear how fluent our students become in these foreign languages. And so really that's the goal in both of these programs. At the ab initio level, which is what they call this course, it's really the first 2 years of study of the language. But really during that time, the students getting quite a lot of depth in the grammar and in the different skills of foreign language, comprehension, reading and writing, cultural kind of understanding. So it's another great option if the student has a lot of interest in a foreign language. With that, I'm going to introduce our newest member of our faculty to talk about the course requests and scheduling process, Dr. Jeff Lipp.
I think I got the last slide, so fire her up about that, right? So we met with the students back on February 5th, I believe, and they picked up a course request form. You should be able to see that on their course request form. It's something they want to share with you, and then there's a spot for your parent's signature on there. What we're going to do is we're going to meet with them again on February 26th, and then we're going to, they're going to bring their laptops down, and then we're going to input the course requests into the system, and then help develop their schedule for next year. So.
Thank you, Dr. Lipp. And with that, I just want to thank everybody for coming this evening. There was a lot of detail, but you could even give more detail if you'd like, because we're going to line up right here on the stage. I'm going to ask that the teachers kind of come up here. And if you have questions, individual questions about any given subject that we can answer, we want to do that at this time.